Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us here. Welcome to Galactic Explorers. You have got Dallas with us this evening and myself, Daniela, here. So thank you for joining us. We are going to dive right into the discussion this evening. And so, Dallas, if you would break out the fish bowl. Yay, fish bowl. Let's see what you have for us this evening. We've got a gloriously thundery, blustery weather outside, so if you hear any rumbling from my end, that is actually thunder. So this should be a fun topic. Oh, what do we got?
Kids.
Kids? I ain't got none of them.
Well, here's this. I put some like topics on there: family, cycle, patterns, lifetime together, belief systems, boundaries, filters.
All right, into one of those aspects: kids, family, spirituality, balancing all of that, having a family life. What do you pass on? What do you not pass on? What do you ideally pass on? What do you realistically pass on? And that could be a really good, a good place for you to take the helm in this conversation, right?
Well, I got some things to say about that.
I bet you do. But yeah, so kids. Take it away, Dallas.
I have two children.
There you go.
And they're 7 and 10, girl and a boy. And I think when I wrote this, for me, it was the patterns, like, this is perfect. So this past weekend, had kidney stones.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, shit, I go through that. I'm going through that. And then I'm talking to my acupuncturist, and she's helping me with the points and supplements. And she found the supplement, and she listed all these symptoms that I've had and are possibly build up to. And the things that it could build up to, my mother is experiencing.
Oh,
right now.
Interesting.
So I was like,
through the family line.
Yeah.
Is it actually genetic or is it energetic?
Right. So really
interesting. Mm-hmm.
That was, I think, something that came up of how, like a genetic way of carrying those patterns, or, so I've been kind of looking at more detailed in the kidneys, and then what I'm carrying for my mother, or carrying from my mother, and like what my grandmother carried, and
what emotional, spiritual baggage are you carrying around for them? Trying to help, and we end up carrying other people's baggage for them, which doesn't actually help them nor us, but it's the only thing we know how to do at the time, right? So we end up carrying it with us. I've definitely noticed some similarities, luckily not with kidney stones, but interestingly enough, it is related to kidney stones. It's the stuff that kidney stones are made out of, that mineral, or that enzyme or whatever that is that builds up to create a kidney stone. Instead of getting kidney stones, my mom and now I have noticed that I am starting to exhibit this. So I got to look at my own baggage, right? Is it coalesces in the joints? It coagulates in the joints. And so it's like, oh God, it's like glass shards in your joints.
Oh, ew.
And so it's, once they get settled in, if you sit there for long enough, it's pretty painful to get up and start stretching them and moving them again. But once you're warm, it's fine. But it's interesting to see you're repeating some patterns there, carrying some of that on forward there. So there's stuff to clear there. And so I'm doing it, or I should say, because they're not necessarily causing one another, but I'm also showing it. So where are we carrying that on? Where is she carrying it from?
Right. Well, and then I know I kind of been digging at it a little bit, and it's definitely on a cellular level.
Cellular? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks. And kind of like breaking the cycle, right? Like I'm the black sheep. I am the one that's breaking the cycles and not repeating those patterns.
Yep.
that's just not a behavioral or the emotional that I am breaking from. It's also the genetics and how
Yeah.
my physical body is carrying still those patterns of what they carried. And it's like, I don't got to carry that. And I don't have to pass that on to my kids, even though I've already had my children.
Right. No, they don't have to take on that energetic pattern.
Right. I can still change that and not, I think even saying, oh, you're going to have this later in life, that always sets that pattern of, oh, I'm going to have this later in my life, because that's what
all
my
training.
parents said. Yeah, it's in the family. You're going to get it anyway.
Right. Or it's genetic. Yeah, you're going to, yeah. That brings up 2 points that I want to bring up, and maybe this is like a direction we can go in and have us discuss, is one, are you familiar with epigenetics and Dr. Bruce Lipton and his work?
I've heard of it, but I'm not.
You definitely got to dive in. Definitely got to dive into that, and I'll shoot you some links.
Okay.
And I can drop some links below in the YouTube video too, as well, for any of our listeners that want to dive into this, because it is infinitely interesting and fascinating, and probably what will be able to help us change humanity in a lot of ways, is to reform our beliefs about what our body is capable of and what affects it, and things like that. So essentially epigenetics is the idea that our genes, quote unquote, things, the chromosomes and all of that stuff, our genes don't actually determine jack squat. They don't run our lives. We are not a victim of our genes. It's that whole idea that we're not victims genetically. There is an energetic signature to particular types of DisEase that can be passed on through belief system, which kind of leads me to the other aspect of what I want to talk about. Big win. Holy shit. Sorry. I might have to cut that out. Maybe that's going in the bloopers. I don't know. Maybe not. I may have to go rescue some of my plants off of the banister in a second. But anyway, that brings me to the second point from epigenetics, is that the idea that adopted children take on the medical issues of their adopted parents. They're not genetically related to them whatsoever, but they will exhibit the same issues and the same diseases as their adoptive parents. So that tells you right there, in the instances that they've documented and studied, that it's not physically, biologically genetic. It doesn't have to be.
Wow.
That there's more going on here than that.
Oh yeah, that's fascinating. Oh my God.
So epigenetics, Dr. Bruce Lipton, his work, he's been at this for like 35 plus years. He was doing it way back in the day when stem cells weren't even a thing yet. And he was working on them. So I love listening to him. And, of course, I'm not getting paid by anybody to say any of this, but he is one of the names that I really enjoy listening to, because he has got just a wealth of physical experience with the topic at hand. So he really just knows what the hell he's talking about and can explain it in such a way that you and I and everybody else can understand what the fuck he understands.
Right.
Really important. And to share this information and change the way most everyday people can feel about themselves and understand themselves and their body.
Right. We're not doomed.
So that's kind of I guess where we could go with it, is the whole idea then, is disease actually genetic? Is it energetically, genetically passed down? Does it have to be? Where do our physical genes come into play versus our spiritual blueprint? Because that's a whole idea of it in itself, especially for those of us who are walk-ins.
Right.
And that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother time, and I hope it's in the bowl. But, right?
Come on.
All right, gotta write that down. So, right, totally. But so it's, because as walk-ins, it's we, kind of bargained to I want to say borrow this body, but you know, it's not like we were genetically lined up to be here. So what we are exhibiting in a sense is almost like the adoptive parents thing, where it's like our soul is not necessarily genetically linked ancestrally to the line of people that we have been born into. But yet we still exhibit a lot, some of, not always, but I should say some, of their, here comes the rain, of their diseases.
Yeah.
And dis-ills and, you know, illnesses and, you know, because we're raised by them.
Yeah.
Unless you
Right.
come in like way late as a walk-in, and then, you know, that's when you get the instances of people in car wrecks that then all of a sudden, you know, or have strokes, excuse me, and then all of a sudden they come back around from being out of the coma and everybody around them says that they've changed.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the same person anymore. That's a different kind of walk-in, right?
Right.
That's a different kind of situation. But talking about energetic genetics, that could be a whole nother thing too. So with your kids,
Yeah.
what are some things that, are you noticing any of that stuff being passed down yet? Are you like, what are you doing to not pass it down? Like, let's talk about
Well,
that.
so I see my daughter who's 10. She I see things of like patterns that my mom carries of very indecisiveness. There's a few things that she does, and I know it's the same like as my mom. Like they're like almost the same, and I'm just kind of, okay, how do I navigate from not like, oh, just hurry up, make up your mind, or a negative way of just kind of really listening to her, paying attention, giving her attention, and I'm really trying to figure out of how to approach it right now because she's changing, she's developing, she's you know,
she's at that certain age too.
Yeah,
she's at an age marker. Yeah,
where it's a very kind of almost like a fragile time where I feel it's almost like damned if I go this route, or be damned if I do this, you know, like, so either way, there's no wrong way to it. It's just I'm trying to learn her patterns, and I see and recognize even for myself of what she's carried that I've said or whatnot. So it's very interesting to see a little mini you, or a little person that you
my
created.
God, that's gonna blow my friggin' mind. My mom has always threatened me with that too. She's like, I hope you have one just like you, because apparently I was not the easiest kid to deal with. I do have a mischievous streak, but it's interesting. That aside, right? But it's funny that you mentioned that you're noticing traits from your mom in your daughter. Is that my mom tells me that she sees traits of her mom and me.
Right.
Like either personality traits, or she even says like the way that I scrunch up my eyebrows to where there's like a little M right here, like those tabby cats, right?
Yeah.
Like she says like, oh my God, you have my mother's eyebrows.
How funny.
Like,
right.
How, you know? So what's to
It's
that? You know? Like is it like skipping a generation? Is it coming down? Is it
I think
passing through mom but not exhibiting as much as like, you know, other traits? And then what determines, I guess that's the bigger question, is what determines what traits or what genes or what have you turn on and off?
Right. Well, and definitely mirror. She's a mirror, right? Juliet's my daughter. She's a mirror. My mom's a mirror. And I'm trying to find the words to say. I turn and see Juliet as my mom and the patterns and how my mom is right now. Yeah. And I go, oh, I don't want her to go on this same path that my mom had.
You want to try and nip that in the bud early so she doesn't have to go through all of that.
Yeah, and really give her confidence. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is just giving your kid confidence overall. But my mom lacked so much confidence that she just pleased everybody and just walked over and whatever.
Right. I mean, and that's been that's a thing that's like, you notice a lot and it gets passed down.
Mhm.
And that's just like a learned personality trait.
Yeah, and it's something where I have to too know that she's her own person,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to fix her. I just want
Right.
to be there and be supportive and
Right. Well, because to be honest, we need people that really give a damn. You know what I mean? Like, we need people that care about things other than themselves, to the point where it's like, you know, they give of themselves to take care of it.
Mhm.
You know, it's like there's a lot of need for that in the world, because there's a lot of people that play for the other side of the team and play for numero uno. And so I
Yeah.
imagine it must be difficult to balance trying to explain having a good heart and being kind to people, but also not falling victim to the same pattern of ending up as a doormat.
Right. And that's where the boundaries come in.
Yeah.
You know, I've had to learn to put my boundaries with my mom, and you know what? I'm not going to listen of you being the victim anymore. If that's where you want to stay, that's fine. Then I'm not going to participate in conversations, and I'm not going to have conversations with you or talk about certain things. You know, and the same with my daughter. Now, I'm not going to have a conversation when you're going to choose just to, you know, oh, the world's ending. Okay, well, that's your opinion, and that's what you're going to sit with, and our conversation is going to be over. So it's really,
No, it reminds me of the way, this is really funny. Again, I know we talked about this off camera, but it really reminds me of the way of Mary, the way that Mary raised her son, where it's like, and I got to see him from probably maybe 6 or 7 years old, and watch him go from there. But she used to tell him, like, whenever he started to pitch a fit or something, she's like, okay, that's your right to pitch a fit. That's fine. You can go ahead and keep on doing that. But I'm not going to talk to you about getting you what you want or
right.
what you're trying to get until you can talk to me like an adult.
Well,
And
I think,
just let him have it. Just
yeah,
let him have it. Like he, like burn it off and whatever. And but you'd sit there and you're standing there as a parent, like as a non-parent, particularly as myself, and I'm going, yeah, let him get it out. I mean, because like stifling energy, regardless of where it's coming from, is not necessarily healthy. You got to channel it into something, right?
yeah,
As long as they're not being hyper destructive about it. But
right.
just let them get it out, and then teach
Mhm.
them teach them by example that when they want something that they can negotiate.
Yeah, or
And
yeah,
it
definitely,
doesn't have to be a victim game,
yeah,
right?
right. You
Because that's
just
a big thing that's passed on too, is playing the victim game, being passive aggressive, trying to be backwardly, unintentionally, unknowingly manipulative to get what you want, because you don't realize that you can just talk about it.
yeah.
I see that
Oh,
as a pattern a lot that gets passed on.
that's my son.
Yeah. Shit. Nope. Called it. Didn't mean to call it out, but I called it. And I'm like very, have seen him very little, but
Yeah. Well, he will throw a fit. You ask for something, no. And I'll cry or I'll, act out in some way. And it's like, okay, you can have that fit, but you're still not going to get that.
right.
So here's your other choices. Ooh, that's a good one. Like, here's your other choices. You can choose from that, or you can just stay where you are.
Yeah.
It's really about boundaries. It's about holding steadfast of, I'm not going to play that kind of game of push and pull. And I have to be careful too, as a mom, as a parent,
Right. To not play the power game
to
in
play
a
the power
family.
game.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's very
And not pass that down.
and then it's great to see that though, when it does come up and I go, oh, but then I'm real quick, I clear it and I'll apologize to my kids. I'm sorry I overreacted, or if I said this or that, that was my fault. I shouldn't have acted that way.
Right.
And
And
so
I
I
think what's
can,
an important lesson that I just want to point out there is the whole idea of you setting boundaries teaches them that
Mhm.
when they get to be adults, grown adults, that they can set boundaries for what makes them happy.
Yeah.
And what's, makes them feel safe and secure, and, all, like they can create their own boundaries. Right. And then the second point too, it's all just kind of right there, is to you breaking the cycle of stuff that gets passed on.
Yeah.
And trying your best to teach the kids the way, like another option of how to act and react to stuff.
Definitely
To own
the
your
reaction.
Shit. That's the second point, is to own your shit, in the sense where it's like, you can't own it and say, I'm sorry, and move forward. But again, that's not something that's really being taught a lot to kids these days, I imagine, from what I hear.
Not. Yeah.
So in school, it's like really hard for the good kids to get along, because it's like, so what are we passing, so what is everybody else passing down? What kind of trauma and all of that stuff is everybody else passing down to their kids that they're not realizing, that got passed down to them? And none of it actually even has to be genetic. It doesn't even have to be there.
No, it's definitely emotional and energetic of how we feel, how our parents have made us feel up to a certain point, right? So that's about, I want to say 7, 8.
Yeah, they say like 7, and then 14, 15 is like,
it's kind of like those more awareness and understanding of things. So it's interesting to see now, like my son is 7, of what he's really understanding and seeing what he can get away with, and then how my daughter is kind of still in that field and learning some really hard lessons, sometimes in really hard ways, with friends and with her family.
I was going to ask, it's like, how do you go about teaching your kids to share this alternate perspective of how to act and react than what you normally see?
It's
like how they get treated and how then they treat kids back.
Well,
and
I would say the past couple of years with my daughter, I've really worked with her and sat and we've talked and kind of worked on owning our own space and our own energy, because she's had some instance a couple of years ago where she had some friends that they were all good, and then another friend got added, and then now they're singling somebody out, or Juliet says something and they're like, oh, now Juliet's mean, or so then they gave her a hard time, and Juliet started acting out in certain ways where the school's trying to like, okay, you need to do this or do that. And I'm like, you just need to own your feelings. You need to, tell those girls if they say something to you that you can't talk to me this way, or go talk to an adult if it gets extreme, or, and I had to really work with the teacher and the counselor to be like, this is how I'm teaching my kid to stand up for herself, to talk things out, because Juliet tried to talk things out, but it was interesting of like, well, they have to do this, or they gotta, it was just kind of like.
So basically you're saying you just had to get involved.
Yeah.
You just had to get your hands in there. You kind of more or less had to get your hands dirty with your kid and just get involved in her education and her training.
Yeah. Which was good. It was hard. It was really hard because it was a back and forth thing constantly. And it got to the point where Juliet, I just had to, you don't have to let them talk to you that way. You can stand up for yourself and say, no, you can't talk to me this way. I don't have to participate in this conversation, and just walk away.
Right.
That's all you got to do. And if you feel like you're going to like cry or you want to scream, go out into the field if it's on recess and let out a scream, or go run, or, hey teacher, I need like 5 minutes to myself. We worked things out where Juliet could go have her quiet time or catch her breath, or, release her, because I told her it's valid how you feel. I think that's the thing. We want to validate their feelings, their emotions, when you're a young kid, you don't know, like.
Right.
We were
And then
friends,
just
and
help
now we're
them
not.
channel how they feel instead of
Yeah,
bottling it up or channeling it into something that's unhealthy.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I'm teaching my kids to, like, if you're angry, go get a baseball bat, go in your room with a pillow, but let us know what you're doing, keep it
Right.
safe, and beat the pillow for one, like, I play a song, and then when the song's over, you're done, and let it go. And you're not going to go backwards. You're going to keep just
You
moving
got to get
forward.
those kids a punching bag. I tell you that.
Yeah, that's next.
A
We
punching bag.
gotta,
No, I mean, I love mine.
yeah,
Honestly, anytime I'm just like super frustrated, it's, you just give it like a good couple of whacks and it's like, okay, you get that coiled energy out of your system
hmm I think that's the thing.
in a way that's healthy, and you're not hurting anybody, you're not hurting anything.
Yeah,
It's not actual like intended aggression.
right.
It's releasing stored up frustration.
Yeah, you have to let it out. I
Yeah.
think that's where, and I think it's starting to come up where you have to let your emotions out, whether it's crying, you need to
Right.
scream,
But
or
in
you're
some way that's healthy
to
rather
be healthy
than
and safe.
on other people,
Right.
taking it out on other
Yes.
people, as it were.
Or a house or a car. You're not
Right.
taking abuse out. You're
Yeah.
just, you're in your safe environment, and you let your anger out, and then you go.
Yeah.
So it's definitely interesting through children and
Mhm.
myself of learning. Like, I've gone through it, so I'm like, okay, now I can teach
Yeah.
them this.
Yeah. I was going to ask, like, what kinds of things have you done? And we can talk about what we've both done. But I just was curious, too, as part of the conversation, what you've done to clear a lot of that ancestral, genetic lineage, emotional, spiritual baggage. What
Um,
are some things that you like to do for yourself? You don't have to list the whole thing. You don't have to go
yeah,
through the whole process, but it's just like, I think people would be interested to hear kind of, like what our methods might be for
hmm
helping themselves, right?
I think, well, not think, writing is a big one. If I'm mad at my mom, or a situation that comes up from the past where that anger or whatnot, I write it. I've-
Mm-hmm.
I'll write all the hurtful things I would ever want to say to her, and then I'll burn it, and um, that's that. And do
Mm-hmm.
my clearing. I do clearing statements a lot. I've do meditations and kind of work where I kind of channel that energy, and kind of I'll clear it. I
Mm.
don't, just
So you
kidding.
basically you're saying that it's like you bring it in and you feel it, and then at least for the way I experience it, it's like almost by feeling it to, I wouldn't say an extreme, but like putting yourself right there in the middle of the shitstorm
Yes.
and feeling it
Yes.
as
Yes.
worse as it can
Thank you.
get, feeling it, and then just going, okay, I felt it. It doesn't have, like I can work my way back out of this now
Yeah.
because this is not, I don't want to feel like this all the time.
Right. And it's sending it back to the source and recognizing for what it taught me as well.
Mhm.
Because there's always a lesson, I guess you want to say, of the
Yeah.
experience
Or
you
something
have,
that it's, yeah, something's trying to show you or
and
get you to
navigate of
realize.
the growth for yourself. So, like with the whole kidney thing right now, is seeing my mom as this person, and what she's going through her whole life is that I don't have to live that way, and I can take care of myself, and I can love myself, and blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah. So writing, meditation, definitely getting out by myself in nature is a huge one, where I can really ground and
Yeah.
or let go if I need to cry or whatnot, and just kind of sit with myself in nature and
Absolutely.
natural environment, and that helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I was gonna say I've done a lot of similar things. Like occasionally I turn to writing as well. Probably not as often. Um, it's interesting. There's something about, and that's something that I continue to work with about, um, having things written down being used against you.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough. So that's something that I'm working with. So it's not necessarily a medium that I always go to, because I have had it used against me in the past and multiple times, not only in this lifetime, but I feel like before, where it's like, I feel like there's a connection there that I really, need to go in and dig deeper into it than I have and work on it. But I certainly feel safer writing now than I did. So mostly a lot of the internal work, where it's like, yeah, you either go out to nature or you find a spot to yourself in your house where you feel like you have a moment, and going into those feels of how they made you feel or how a situation made you feel and letting it pass through. Right. As it's coming up, right? Not to flip anybody off, by the way, just like no, we're not going there. But yeah, just to let it come out. And it's interesting, yeah, whether or not you have to like cry or just her or like beach pillow or whatever.
Right.
Just so you're not holding on to it anymore. Because I feel like that is the cause of a lot of why people act the way they act, and us included as we work on our stuff, is it's like you're reacting out of repeated patterns that you learned from somebody else who learned them from somebody else who learned them from somebody else. And it's almost like you're on an autopilot and you're not making a decision for yourself how you want to react in the moment, number one. But the way that we've been taught to react to stuff, I think, needs to change and evolve.
Of course. Yeah.
And I think by passing that on to, for instance, like your kids, and having them pass how they react onto the kids around them, I think is going to be really where we might make some headway.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think too, to remember is there's always layers of it.
Yep.
You're never completely dissolve it and not remember it.
Right. It's going to come up again in another way. It's going to show itself. Here's another side of this that you thought you forgot about, BT dubs.
Oh, yeah.
Process this ish. You're like mother.
Yeah. Didn't I already clear you?
Like, why am I crying again? I thought I processed this. This is bullshit. Yeah.
So that's all. There's layers of it. There's always layers of it. And it's a good thing, because then it gets deeper to that root of origin that one day will dissolve. Right.
And it comes up less and less the more you work on it. I feel like the more you do your best to look at stuff head on. Yeah. We all have our blind spots and everything. And that's, why we congregate, so we can help one another out.
Yeah.
But just do your best to call yourself on your own stuff and to catch it. Because the more you can catch it, the less it happens.
Right. Absolutely. It's huge.
Yeah. So that's passing that on to kids, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so like the really quick in the end here, I guess the idea of, so what you're correlating is that energetically there is a almost not enoughness and people pleasing energetic signature that's being passed down through the line that's causing things like kidney stones to present in the physical body.
Right.
You think?
Yeah, I do. I think it's for me, I think it's like a wake up call. Get your shit together, Dallas.
Before it gets worse, right?
Right. That's how our body lets us know when something is off or we're not in alignment. It comes up in a kidney stone or, plantar fasciitis or back pain or whatever it is. It can be anything and everything. Not all the time. But for me, I think a majority of the time it is. But it was amazing.
Yeah, eventually it manifests physically. Eventually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But seeing that on that level of, okay, now my mother has this and this and this, but I'm kind of experiencing these minor symptoms now because there's another deeper issue in my body that I'm carrying. And, so now it's looking at what the kidneys represent, what that system flow is.
What is it trying to tell you by where it's presenting?
Yeah. So there's a whole, the whole list, and you got to check all the boxes. And
And then there's the idea too that it's not even in the area that it's presenting in. By the time it presents itself, the origin is somewhere else.
Exactly. Oh yeah, for that one. It's a big one.
You know, so it's like if your leg is hurting, it's probably got nothing to do with your leg. It's probably somewhere up in your hips
Yeah.
or your chest or somewhere where you're like misaligned and holding yourself weird. That's causing your
Right.
body to compensate. That's causing your leg to have cramps. Like, you know, some
Yeah.
kind of weird shit like that. Because that's
Well, that's right. That's how like the body works,
how
right?
it.
It's like
Mhm.
different sides. So if your right side's bothering, something on the left side's going on. Or whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a whole other interesting topic too. But
Yeah.
how our body shows us what's, you know, like what we're holding on to,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be genetic, ancestral lineage, or our own stuff that we picked up along the way.
Right.
Or other people's stuff that we picked up along the way too. Because it's not just a parent. Excuse me, it's not just our parents.
Oh, it's can be anything. It can be from anybody. You know, even friends
Oh yeah.
or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, anybody that it's having the awareness of it and being just aware and check into yourself and
Yeah.
the most
And watch your
greatest
kids and watch for patterns, right?
right.
Watch for patterns everywhere. Yeah.
It's I'm trying to think of the word. It's just being aware and asking, is this mine? Is it mine? Is this really mine?
Yeah.
Nope. Okay.
Is this a part of me? Is this part of who I really am? Like, does this actually belong to my personality and my soul blueprint?
Right.
Yeah.
'Cause that's
Very
important.
important question to be asking. Definitely.
And teaching that to your children. Ask that. Trust your intuition. You know, trust that little voice because that's what it's doing. It's guiding you, you know, and as littler kids and trusting them with that will set them up for when they get to those ages where things start changing and they realize something that they kind of have a little bit of understanding, probably more than we can think of.
Yeah.
You know, because they're pretty in tuned.
Yeah, especially the kids that are coming out these days. Good Lord.
Right.
Damn, even my dog is like aware. I mean, we call him Star Dog.
Animals.
Like,
Oh,
yeah, we call him the Star Dog for like no half a joke. Like it's interesting some of the stuff he does
yeah.
and some of the ways he reacts. So yeah, well, that's awesome. I think that's a really open perspective on kids and passing things down genetically, like physically. Like, is it actually genetic through the body? Is it energetic? You know, that the baggage that we take on from one another. Where can we stop it? You know, it's like, where can we stop the family curse in its tracks, more or less, you know, in a sense.
Yeah.
Some people consider it's like, oh, the family curse of always having bad knees or always getting cancer, or, you know, it's like there's some investigation that you could do there that probably has nothing to do with the physical body. So
Right.
it's a very interesting and open perspective to think about for people as to where their illnesses really come from, and if they can be the person to alleviate that from their line,
Yeah.
from not only themselves but for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, yeah, we're right in the middle sometimes of clearing up the past and kind of setting up the future, you know, so it's kind of a balance game. You gotta,
Yeah. Well, there is that old, and I'm going to butcher it, that old, the Native American saying that's, you know, when you do your healing, it's like, you know, you heal 7 generations before you and 7 after you.
yeah,
That kind
exactly.
of thing.
Yep.
So that could be a word to the wise, I suppose, for the listeners, for doing your own inner work and working through your own ancestral and working through your parents' baggage, because then not only do you not have to deal with it, they don't have to deal with it, your kids don't have to deal with it. And let me just tell you, if you've had issues with your parents, which, you know, most of us do, being the black sheep, right? It's very interesting when you do your own ancestral work, because even if you are the walk-in, more or less, there's a really good chance that you got hired to do just this very thing, to clean up the shit, because it's apparently what you're good at, right? It's like they had to call in the heavy, so they had to call in somebody else to come in and take care of their shit.
Yeah.
That should kind of be a compliment. But the idea is that when you do yours, not only are you healing yourself and your side of the feels of that energetic field, but you're also alleviating that from a lot of the other parts of your line. So I've even totally experienced in real time where I've done my ancestral work, and then, only less than a handful of months later, the relationship with my parents completely changed.
Yeah.
For the positive. Let me make that clear. They stopped fighting a lot between each other and between me, and like the whole putting me in the middle thing, all of this stuff, like being messenger back and forth. It's like, oh, this person's pissed because of this, and oh, this person's pissed because of this, and oh, they just can't talk it out between themselves sometimes,
Right.
That pretty much quit. So, there's something to be said for that, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I don't think there's anything else I can really say about it. I think you're right on.
Well, there you go. Well, I guess on that note, we'll close out this podcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, joining Dallas and I here on Galactic Explorers, as we talked about all kinds of things relating to spirituality and kids, passing along genetic DisEases, whether or not it's energetic, whether or not it's genetic, kinds of things that we talked about that you could do to maybe start working on yourself in your own line, and things that you can pass down to your kids, and maybe look into different kinds of perspectives like that. So thank you guys for joining us. As always, like, subscribe, share, all that wonderful stuff. We appreciate all of you. And if you ever have any topics that you would like for us to cover and put in the bowl, drop it in the comments below. If you've got any ideas or points of view about what we talked about today, we would love to hear them. Drop those in the comments below too. So thank you guys for joining us. This has been Dallas and Daniela of Galactic Explorers, and we will see you